A whatatiri maunga e tū nei te au I te pō. Te ngā here poike, te pātaka kai, e hoki mai ana ngā kukupā o ngā hapu e toru, ko te ure roi roi, ko te parawhau, ko te māhure hure ki whatitiri. Ko waipa o te aua, I ruku hia, I unimea, I oku mātua tūpuna, ko maunga rongo te marae, hei tangi ki ngā hunga mate, hei mihi ki ngā hunga ora, tēnei te mihi a ngā puhi nui tonu e. Tihei wā mauri ora. Ko te mea tūtahi ki a koe e Alex, ai, te kai mihi, te kai karakia, I tūwhera koe, I tō mātou hui, te tikanga pai, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. He mihi poto, anā reira ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'm real happy to be here tonight to speak, mostly because I heard there was going to be a feed, and there are lots of stereotypes I reject, but as a Māori, that's one I embrace. So he could have asked me to do a talk in a fish and chip shop about reconciliation. I would have been like, bro, I'm there. I'm stoked here because it's cool to be at an event named after someone I admired greatly. Sir John, or DJ as I knew him, was the founding chair of an organisation I still work for. And this is how much you knew I respected him. I never, ever, ever referred to him as bro. He was always sir. He was a very humble and encouraging man. And so, yeah, thank you to your mihi to him. I'm going to start with a caveat, and the caveat is this is a Māori perspective to contextualise some of these conversations, not the Māori perspective. I say that because it's important to realise I can't represent all Māori, and those Māoris who I might be able to represent, Ngāpuhi, well, we can't decide on one position on anything anyways. No, this is my window into my world, and so, yeah, come along. The second thing I want to do is define the term reconciliation. In this context, all I mean is the restoration of relationship. Now, for the many Māori in here, what we mean by that is to our own cultures and to our whenua and to the spiritual realm. But I do want to say that a major theme tonight will be restoration between Māori and non-Māori. I'm not going to try and synthesize my ideas too much tonight. Because some days I wake up and I love being from Aotearoa, and some days I hate it. Every step I take forward as an individual, I see countless whānau take countless steps backwards. And so rather than try and give you an oversimplified idea, I'm just going to share 3 stories with you tonight that will hopefully create a context or a frame that we can slot some of the information that, you know, old mate with the doctorate in reconciliation can fill in and teach us about. So my first story. In 1924, an amazing man was born. He was from Ngāpuhi. His name was Māori Marsden, Māori being his first name, Marsden being his last name. He's known as a philosopher, a theologian, a tohunga. On his return from World War II, he was having a conversation with a kaumātua, an elder from up north. And the elder said, how did the war end? So all in te reo Māori, this fella, Māori Marsden, is describing the nuclear bomb and the splitting of the atom. And this Māori kaumātua says, so those Pākehā figured out how to split the fabric of the universe, have they? And he said, yeah, they have. And then that same kaumātua says, well, do those guys know how to put those same atoms back together? And he said, nah, they haven't. I tell that story because it is a really beautiful way of saying the histories that we come from, good and bad, they can't be undone. Those same atoms can't be put back together. So reconciliation as a process can never be finite because we're trying to strengthen ties that have been broken because we can't undo them. The second reason I share that story is the fabric of the universe is a wonderful metaphor to describe our interconnectedness, material and immaterial. But mostly it actually suggests there's an invitation for all of the created and spiritual beings in the universe to help put it back together. It's my first story. My second story is a story that a lot of us will know about. It happened between Waikato, Tainui and the Crown. It was the first Treaty of Waitangi settlement. For those of you who want a quick recap, Waikato Tainui decided to engage directly with the Crown. The total economic loss of the raupatu, or the confiscated lands, was at 12 billion in 1995. What was offered to them was about 1.7% of that. And under the leadership of the Māori Queen for the Waikato Tainui, Dame Te Atarangi Kahu, they said yes. Now, I was brought up, my father, very strong ties into Tainui, so I heard a lot of this discourse on the inside of our house. And one of the most interesting things, which is always overlooked, is the fact that many people did not want to go with that deal. I hear stories, so they're only stories, about her standing up in hui and saying to people, they can't take our mana away from us because they never had it in the first place. So they're not giving us 2%. We're giving the country 98% back. One of the great ironies in the universe is the fact that often the person wronged or the victim needs to do the heavy lifting to free both themselves and the perpetrator. But these aren't the stories that we memorialize. In 100 years, are these the stories that we're going to tell around how we got over some of those humps? I'm unsure. What I do know that as a Māori, it feels like there's a lot of heavy lifting going on, and we don't even get acknowledgement for some of that stuff. My final story. It's about me, and it's about our journey in our whānau learning te reo Māori. From my grandparents down, there are 6 generations now, 94 of us all up. Another Māori stereotype I won't not acknowledge is that we are good at making babies. Really, really good. My grandparents were born in the 1920s, so when they had their 9 kids, they decided they weren't going to teach their kids te reo Māori. A nuclear bomb went off. The funny thing about that decision is 6 generations later, only 8 of 94 of us can speak te reo Māori. And that includes the first 2 grandparents. I'm currently on sabbatical actually studying te reo Māori, and it's a Pākehā organisation who's helping me to do it. And sometimes I feel really grateful that this is my life, and other times I sit in class and I cry because it's really hard. You know, at the end of the year, when I become the 9th person in my whānau, what are we going to do, celebrate? No. I'm going to become one of 2 adults who are still alive. Are going to start engaging the 70 plus whānau who can't speak reo. Te reo Māori is not a functional language, it's a gateway to belonging. Now I tell the story because someone who's going to their own te reo classes and pats their Māori friend on the back, that stuff is all wanted and needed, but intergenerational trauma isn't a one-off event. It's not just goodwill. It has to be more than that. Now, I spend my entire life, my entire work is around finding common ground with the people in the room. But as I sit on a table full of Māori, what we know to be true in this room is we can't opt out of this process of reconciliation. Because to do so for us is to make the well-being of our kids worse off. But there are people in here who can and do opt out of that type of reconciliation. I'm not going to sit here and hit you over the head with a hammer or guilt trip you. This is my invitation to you to co-labour. I often talk to my son and I tell him that my aspiration for him is the ability to take what skills he has and to engage in the burden and the work of reconciliation. And I work for a parenting place, and that goes against all of our advice. But what I know is the realities of being Māori in this country is knowing your legacy is lessening the burden for those in front of you. So I go back to my original metaphor around the fabric of the universe, and I say it's sacred work, it's tapu work, it's work that you can opt out of, but please don't. Please don't. Everything we hear tonight from the keynote speaker, I want you to contextualize that into Aotearoa, into these stories that you've heard. And I want you to see if there's place for you at the table, which I am a Māori is saying there is, to engage in this stuff. I've got a lot of power right now because we can't eat until the karakia is done. And the power's really going to my head. I want you to know that. Man, this is what white privilege feels like. This is awesome. This is great. I wouldn't give it up if I was you guys. This is real good. No. I'm going to do the karakia. E te atua whakapaini nei kai, hei oranga mō mātou tinana whangai hoki mō mātou wairua. Ki te taro o te ora, i roto i te ingoa o ihu karaiti tō mātou kai whakaora. Āmene and mauri ora.